Dr. Marcin Kleban. We'll talk today about navigating the academic classroom waters. Dr. Marcin Kleban is an assistant professor at the Institute of English Studies at Jagiellonian University. He completed Master of Didactics program at University College London and now manages Master of Didactics Tutoring Implementation program at Jagiellonian University. He teaches academic didactics courses and English language teacher development courses for academic faculty. He graduated from John Paul II Catholic University in Lublin and the University of Leeds in the United Kingdom. So, dear guest, the audience is yours.
So once again, my name is Marcin Kleban, and I work at the Institute of English Studies at our university. And today I'd like to share with you my reflections and experiences of managing academic classes. The title of this presentation is Navigating the Academic Classroom Waters, because I'd like to start with a kind of a marine metaphor, I would say, which I'd like to share with you now. Actually, I invested some time into these animations, so in the original versions you'd be seeing first picture, then the second and the third, but in this manner it doesn't work, and perhaps it's easier. So my metaphor for classes is that we could either see our collaboration with students in our classes in one of those three ways. And I visualize this collaboration in three different ways. That is, we can view relationships with students as a kind of galley, the first picture, where we are the captain and we actually ask our students to row to do the work we want them to do, and they are simply carrying out our orders. This another way of visualizing a kind of a relationship between students and the teacher is that of a cruise liner, where all the captain and the crew are all geared for the passengers or the students' comfort, safety, comfort, that they all feel comfortable while sailing this, being on this boat, enjoying themselves. And perhaps the third metaphor is that of the picture at the bottom. That's actually a HMS Endeavour, an expedition boat used by James Cook, Captain James Cook, which was used to make a number of important discoveries. On such ships, these cruises or these expeditions required from the captain and the crew lots of investments of time, effort, money, but both the captain and the crew were hoping to gain a lot from an expedition like this one, to gain wealth, basically lots of money. But the idea behind this metaphor is that actually both the crew and the captain are making investment in this journey, and they hope to gain a lot. And also, I think that the name of the ship, HMS Endeavour, is very perhaps quite telling. We'll come back to this marine metaphor later, and perhaps we'll be, during our discussion, we'll answer the question: what kind of ship best describes our relationships with our students? Now, I would like to talk a little bit about managing offline and online classes. This presentation is not entirely devoted to the differences between offline and online classes and the ways of managing them. However, I'd like to say a few words about the differences between managing offline and online classes. And here I'd like to highlight some perhaps principles for managing some classes that I find particularly important. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that in both contexts, students, the perhaps the most important principles is that students need to be active. So even though when I teach theory, I always try to follow up with some kind of task, a more practical task where students can apply this theory into some practice. So just to give an example, when I teach, I'm a linguist, and I teach about strategies of language learning. When we talk about different classifications of strategies for language learning, I follow up with a task which asks students to reflect on what kind of strategies, language learning strategies, they use while learning English or any other language. So it's always, I think it's always it's important to make sure that whatever we teach is followed by some kind of is anchored in some kind of student's experience, or in some practical tasks that integrates theory and practice. Another important principle of managing classes is making sure that these classes are varied. Well, many years ago, when I first read well-known course book, well-known among linguists, applied linguists, a course in language teaching by Penny Eyre, the one which is cited here. I read about those very elements of the class that should be or could be varied, such as tempo, modality, level of difficulty. I was trying to implement these principles quite consciously when planning my classes, but I think it is now that I can fully appreciate this principle of making sure and ensuring that the class that we're planning is varied in a number of different ways. Just perhaps I'll spend a minute or two explaining what I mean by varying elements of a class. So any class which is monotonous in any way, such as in terms of the tempo of an activity, of mood. The mood could be obviously quite serious or quite light-hearted. In terms of the modality, so we all perhaps remember classes from our secondary schools which are only based on copying or writing text that our teacher wanted us to write, or the level of difficulty too easy or too difficult tasks completed during a class can actually act as factors that will demotivate our students. So making sure that our class consists of activities that are varied in terms of different elements, such as I said, tempo. We can have fast going and slow activities, some light-hearted activities, some fun activities, but also some serious ones. And those activities that rely on the spoken modality, written modality, listening, writing. So that is classes where which consist of activities which vary. That's really important. With more experience, I do not pay that sort of conscious attention to these elements. However, I'm, as I said, I'm now more experienced, and these principles of designing varied classes in terms of those different levels come to me quite naturally now. Just a few words about managing online classes. At our faculty, and probably at many other faculties, we teach until this day online. All lectures at our faculty are online. All other classes are face-to-face classes. So this online teaching is here to stay. One thing I would like to stress at this point is that online and offline classes, meetings, teaching are not the same. They differ in many respects. Many people try to recreate the same conditions in online classes as they would like to have as they have in face-to-face classes, but that is simply not possible. And the reason is that but there are many reasons. One of the most important reasons why offline and online classes are so different is there are so many different affordances of that describe online and offline classes. What do I mean by this? We have different communication tools at our disposal. There are different communication bandwidths. We can read the body language while we are conducting classes in the classroom. We cannot do this, or to a very, very limited extent while teaching online. But at the same time, I think, that's my private opinion, there's more room for informality in online teaching context. Well, even if we look at the platforms we use for online teaching and the technical tools that we have, communication technical tools, they almost encourage us to engage into informal communication, such as in Teams, we have GIFs at our disposal, or GIFs. We can use links in the chat if we can, because it's not always possible, as we could hear. We can use sounds and so on and so forth. So all of these communication tools are at our disposal when we're teaching online. This is obviously not possible, or, well, the range of such possibilities is limited while we're teaching the face-to-face situation. We have other, obviously, communication tools when we're teaching face-to-face, but not these, or at least these are not easily available. And this reduced bandwidth that we have, that is well, limited communication channels, limited access to reading the body language, intonation, and so on and so forth, is complemented in online spaces by this digital dialogue, as I said, these tools of conducting digital dialogue. Well, breakout rooms, another interesting thing, allows us to be in a number of locations at the same time, perhaps almost. What I always do whenever I organize breakout room work is to visit, even for a short time, each room and then return to them, so that students know that I'm actually with them. I'm monitoring what they're doing. If you have another computer, you can be in 2 locations at the same time, because you can visit these 2 breakout rooms almost at the same time, at least listen to what they are doing. And your presence, a teacher's presence in breakout rooms, acts as a kind of reminder that, yes, I'm interested in what is happening during the class, and I can offer my help, my support. Okay, I'm just trying to speed it up because we started late. Another thing I found really useful, and again, probably I think from what I remember, there was a workshop directly devoted to flipped teaching within this series of meetings. What I'm going to say now are just a few of my reflections and experiences with flipping the classroom. Generally, I would say that students really appreciate flipped classrooms. Simply preparing bespoke class notes, and by this I mean the class notes that were put together by the teacher on the basis of the resources that he or she uses, but were sort of processed by the teacher and prepared for a particular class. I think they work really well. So giving these notes and the list of tasks, a list of topics, preparing questions that students will be faced with during the class, I think it makes a lot of sense. Well, preparing such bespoke notes encourages the teacher to consciously go through the sequence of events during the class, and obviously they need to make sense to the teacher. And if they make this sequence of events, the list of questions starts to make sense to the teacher, chances are they might make sense to students too. And I think this sharing class notes before a class is both useful for online and offline classes. As I mentioned, perhaps maybe I haven't. I did one of my graduate courses entirely online in the UK, and it was a very, very useful experience. I have now an experience of being a student and also a teacher in online classes. I actually appreciated having a list of tasks sent to me before that class, and even a list of questions that we would be discussing in the class. And I do the same with my students now. That actually is, I think, very, very helpful, because you can easily prepare, you know what to expect. And the class time can be used for explanations, discussions, deep level thinking, rather than just reading the text that students were supposed to read. However, it's obviously, this kind of teaching assumes well, at least some degree of student autonomy. We will expect students to be prepared, at least to some extent, for participating in the class, reading the text. Another reflection regarding class management concerns making sure that we elicit what our students know beforehand, or at the very first minutes of our class. Obviously, they do not come to the class empty-headed. They come with a degree of their own knowledge. And as we know that knowledge development proceeds from assimilation to accommodation and then equilibration, it makes sense to connect the new knowledge, whatever we are about to teach, to the old knowledge. So asking students what they know about the topic we are about to teach helps us to make this connection. It's just, for example, when I teach the mechanisms between the processes of first and second language acquisition, I ask students the following questions. How do you think we learn languages? How did you learn your first or your second language? In this way, I encourage their reflection and activate, well, the knowledge that they already have in their minds, and which helps me to continue the discussion. Now, questioning. Well, that's a very, I think, important, it seems perhaps to some might be a simple topic, but what's there to asking a question? But actually, I think that's really important. The way we ask questions, what kind of questions we ask during classes. Effective questioning can support both lower level and high level cognitive processes. By lower level, I mean just recalling facts, recalling some knowledge, and high level by high level cognitive processes, I mean analysis, critical approach to knowledge, or even knowledge creation. There are a number of very taxonomies of questions. For example, lower order and higher order questions. So lower order are questions about which encourage the students to recall facts. Higher order questions, and these we need to obviously, and perhaps more of them, concern students' comprehension of that knowledge, processing relationships between facts, and even knowledge creation. Perhaps some of us, or most of us, perhaps know the Bloom's taxonomy of educational goals, where recall, memorization is at the bottom, the most perhaps basic educational goal, and analysis and creation, knowledge creation, is at the top of this pyramid of educational goals. So these higher order questions encourage students also to not only to recall facts, but also make connections between them, analyze them. Another classification is between display and referential questions. Lots of us actually, including me, will ask a number of display questions, that is, questions we use to elicit an answer from students to which we know the answer. Yeah, what does something mean? Yeah? What is, I don't know, perhaps photosynthesis? We know the answers to these questions, but we want our students to explain these things. But equally important, or perhaps even more important, are referential questions. So WH questions require students to engage in a more profound analysis. How would you interpret something? Yeah? how would you compare? So these perhaps higher order questions. I suppose, including me, I ask myself the question at the bottom here: what is the proportion of display reflection questions in my teaching? I think that's a question worth asking at any stage of our teaching, no matter how experienced we are. Convergent and divergent questions. Convergent questions are those which, when there is some kind of limit to these possible responses, these are usually close-ended questions, while divergent questions are the open-ended questions, which require not only recall but also application, analysis, perhaps criticism, interpretation of the question. Another important aspect related to question is the wait time. So how much time do we give ourselves to wait for the answer? It is also referred as think time. There's some such research which I read carried out in I think 90s in American schools, where the researchers concluded that teachers typically gave students from 0.7 to 1.4 seconds for a response to a question. And that could be intimidating, perhaps, for students. So the conclusion is that perhaps increasing wait time gives students more opportunities for longer responses. It gives more individuals to come up with a response, and also encourages increased length of responses. So very quickly, as we should be engaging in a discussion in a moment, some comments on the language of instructions. Some of the newly qualified teachers or graduates who begin their teaching career very often use quite complicated language for instructions. And this is perhaps not surprising, because this is the kind of language that they are exposed to at university, sophisticated, complex language. However, when it comes to giving instructions to students, it's always worth sticking to simple language, simple verbs, short phrases, such as infinitives, using imperative mode for instructions, read and discuss, analyze, and so on and so forth. The phrase "let's" is very useful for instructions. Let's read and let's consider this or that. Let's analyze, let's compare, and so on and so forth. Yeah. That seems quite simple. This principle seems quite simple, but I think in reality is much more complex, much more difficult, because people have a tendency to, when they think that, well, they usually at universities they talk about quite complicated matters, and they think that perhaps instructions should be delivered in complex language too. Wrapping up a class, so now just a few comments on closing a class and the need for student reflection. Many of us, including me, sometimes teach like crazy into the very last moment of the class, but perhaps this is not a very good idea, because we need this moment of reflection, of giving especially our students a moment of reflection on what they've learned. So this principle on ending on a high note, that is highlighting the most important things that were discussed during the class, is important. So it's best to leave the last few moments for summary and for, reflections. It makes sense to organize these kind of summary activities which encourage students to reflect on what they've learned and what is still to be learned. Some techniques which we might use include the following: a 1-minute paper. That is, we ask students to write within just a single 1 minute, very shortly, answers to the following questions. What was the most important thing you learned today? Or what questions that remains in your mind? What was the aha moment during the class? Tell me, or just ask questions, things like, tell me one thing you will remember after this class. So all of these require or encourage students' reflection. Professor Maciejowska shared this idea of an exit ticket out of the door at the end of the class. That is, students write a few words of what they've learned, or simply it could be a self-assessment activity in which they decide what they're going to do better next time and hand it in to the teacher as they leave. And finally, students need to feel that the teacher is on their side. That simply means they need to feel that there's a supportive attitude from the teacher. Obviously, this doesn't exclude sometimes negative assessment, poor grades, and so on. But at the end of the day, they need to feel student support. They need to see these signals of support, such as clear feedback, that is, before the course begins, they need to know the rules, what they're going to learn, how they can succeed. They need to be given fair feedback, which is balanced, both positive and negatives should be highlighted, and feed forward, that is, what to do in order to improve. And I think it's also important to make sure to make them aware that there are certain lifelines in case of difficulties. What if I fail a test, some tests? Will I have an opportunity to make up for them? What if I fall ill, I don't attend certain classes or a number of classes? Will I be able to make up for it? So throwing these light, or showing students that they have these lifelines in case of difficulty is also important, and builds this kind of rapport between the students and the teacher. And I've learned over the years that that flexibility is important. So, our students are increasingly busy. Lots of them have jobs, and perhaps they have another course. So what we want is really that they complete the task that we ask them to do. As learning is taking place, whether they, perhaps sometimes it doesn't matter whether they do it on this week or perhaps in 2 weeks' time, as long as they complete the assignments we want them to complete. However, obviously, this might depend on the specificity of a course. Like in sciences, students attend laboratory classes, so it might be really important that they pass a test which checks their understanding of the processes behind certain experiments, and so on and so forth. So the time of completing a particular assignment might be important. And I think honest communication between the teacher and students is important, and that this kind of trust relationship is built. My experience is that I actually learned it quite well, maybe not recently, but what I'd like to say is that at the beginning of my teaching career, I thought, academic teaching career, I thought that at this level, students are autonomous adults, and they can actually monitor the deadlines, they can take care of themselves, they will be aware of the consequences of not sending assignments on time. But actually, now I conclude that this is actually not true. A proactive approach, what I mean by this is making sure that I ask students whether they remember about certain dates, I talk to them in cases where they fail to meet a deadline. So this kind of proactive approach, I think, works better. Students feel well taken care of. And even though we would expect them to be adults, to be autonomous adults who take care of their own university careers, education, in my opinion, it doesn't actually work, because many of them need more support than we expect. Okay, so concluding this rather rushed presentation, perhaps, is that I think it's important that we overall build a sense of sailing in the same direction, continuing this marine metaphor. And for me, this picture of HMS Endeavour, where both the captain and the crew are working towards the common goal, because they know they have vested interest in this educational endeavor, is actually, that depicts the right, perhaps the most appropriate metaphor for learning, for university education. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be happy to participate in a discussion.